The Houston sun had not yet cracked the horizon when Shirley Mae Johnson pressed her palm flat against the cold corrugated steel of Unit 14B and whispered the same 3 words she whispered every single morning of her life for the last 7 months. Please, not today. Inside that 10 by 15-foot metal box, the kind of storage unit most people rent to hide old furniture, forgotten Christmas trees, and boxes of things they will never open again, a 10-year-old boy named Dante was folding his blanket into a perfect square, exactly the way his mother had taught him. His 6-year-old sister Amara was already dressed, her hair braided in 2 neat rows, her pink backpack sitting by the roll-up door like a soldier waiting for orders. They were not storing things inside Unit 14B. They were living inside it. And in exactly 47 minutes, a black billionaire named Xavier Drummond, the man who owned the entire storage facility and 312 more just like it across America, was going to pull into the gravel parking lot in a matte black Escalade, walk down the 2nd row, stop in front of Unit 14B, lift the padlock in his own hand, and slide that metal door up. He was about to discover the one thing no spreadsheet in his corporate empire had ever accounted for. He was about to discover Shirley. He was about to discover her children. And he was about to remember something he had spent 32 years of his life trying to forget. Because the woman kneeling on that concrete floor, cleaning the same square inch for the 3rd time, she was not a squatter. She was not a criminal. She was not a statistic in a report. She was a mirror. And what Xavier Drummond saw in that mirror at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October would burn down the man he had spent his entire adult life pretending to be. This is the true story of the day a billionaire opened a storage unit and closed his own past. Stay with me, because what happens in the next 10 minutes will change the way you look at every locked door you have ever walked past. Shirley did not call it living in a storage unit. She called it the system. The system started at 4:30 in the morning when her cheap Walmart alarm buzzed against her wrist under a folded sweatshirt so the sound would not carry through the metal walls. The system meant she was already awake before the buzzer, because a mother who is hiding her children from the world does not sleep the way other mothers sleep. She rests. She listens. She counts the footsteps of the security guard on his 3 a.m. round. She memorizes the sound of every car that turns into the gravel lot. By 4:45, she had rolled up the 3 sleeping mats, 2 thin ones for the children, 1 thinner one for herself, and stacked them behind the cardboard wall she had built out of flattened Amazon boxes at the back of the unit. The cardboard wall was not for privacy. There was no one to see them. The cardboard wall was so that if anyone ever did lift the door, the first thing they would see would look like storage. Boxes, bins, a folded tarp. Nothing that said family. By 5 a.m., she had swept the concrete floor with a small dustpan brush. Not because it was dirty, because a woman like Shirley, a black woman raised in Beaumont, Louisiana, by a grandmother who scrubbed white folks' kitchens for 41 years, did not know how to exist in a space that was not clean. By 5:15, Dante was awake. He never had to be shaken. He just opened his eyes when the light of her small battery lantern touched his face, and he sat up like a soldier receiving orders. 10 years old, reading 2 grade levels behind, silent in a way that 10-year-old boys should never be silent. By 5:30, Amara was awake, giggling into her mother's neck, because Amara was 6, and Amara had not yet figured out that this was not normal. By 6 a.m., the children had eaten. A granola bar each, a small carton of milk kept cold in a thrift store cooler with ice she bought fresh every 2 days from the gas station on Cullen Boulevard. By 6:15, they were dressed in the same 3 outfits they rotated on a strict schedule, all washed every Saturday at the laundromat on Scott Street. By 6:30, Shirley walked them out of Unit 14B. One at a time, 30 seconds apart, so it never looked like a group leaving. And by 6:45, they were walking down the sidewalk of Prairie Street, hand in hand, backpacks bouncing, toward Blackshear Elementary School. Exactly 0.4 miles. She had measured it herself with a phone app, standing on that sidewalk with tears in her eyes 7 months ago, the day she chose this facility over 16 others. Because 0.4 miles was the difference between her son learning to read and her son becoming another black boy the system forgot. Xavier Drummond did not wake up in a storage unit. Xavier Drummond woke up on the 47th floor of a glass condominium in downtown Houston, in a bed that cost more than most families' cars, next to a floor-to-ceiling window that showed him the entire skyline of the city his mother had once cleaned office buildings in for $6.15 an hour. He was 41 years old, 6'2", skin the color of dark honey, a goatee cut so precisely that his barber flew in from Atlanta every 3 weeks. He wore a matte black watch, a matte black suit, and a matte black expression that his employees had learned meant only one thing. Someone was about to lose something. Xavier was the founder and CEO of Drummond Storage Holdings, 313 self-storage facilities across 17 states. Net worth, $1.4 billion. Featured on the cover of Black Enterprise magazine 3 years running. The kind of man who spoke at Morehouse commencement, who mentored young black entrepreneurs at his foundation gala, who tweeted things like, "Discipline is the difference between dreamers and owners." He was also the kind of man who, that morning, was flying to Houston for one specific reason. Facility 217, the one on Cullen Boulevard, the one where Unit 14B was located, was underperforming. Occupancy was at 71%. His internal target was 89%. The property manager, a black man named Terrence Baker, had missed his last 2 quarterly targets. And Xavier had already made the decision, over cold brew in his corner office 3 days ago, to sell the entire facility to a Chicago REIT for $8.4 million and move on. But Xavier Drummond did not sell a facility without walking it first. He called it eye contact with the asset. His mother had a different phrase for it back when she was alive. She used to call it looking a thing in the face before you kill it. He had forgotten she ever said that. At 6:15 a.m., his driver pulled the Escalade into the gravel lot of Facility 217. Xavier stepped out in polished Oxfords, a charcoal overcoat, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. Terrence was already waiting by the office trailer, his face tight, his hands buried in the pockets of a jacket that had been washed too many times. "Mr. Drummond, Terrence, walk me through row 2. And that was how it began. Row 2 of Facility 217 held 48 units. Xavier walked it with the slow, measured pace of a man who was already writing the sale contract in his head. Unit 14A, vacant, padlock rusted. Unit 14C, a retiree's furniture, dust 2 fingers thick. Unit 14B. Xavier stopped. He was not sure at first what had made him stop. The padlock was newer than the ones on either side. Not brand new, but cared for. The kind of padlock a person actually used. He lifted the small clipboard from Terrence's hands and scanned the tenant name. Johnson, S. Month to month. Paid current. 7 months. Terrence, sir, why is this unit paid current when the rest of this row is 30 days delinquent? Terrence did not answer immediately. Xavier looked up. He had been Terrence's boss for 9 years. He knew every tell that man had. And right now, Terrence Baker was doing the thing he did when he was hiding something. He was looking 1 inch to the left of Xavier's eyes. "Terrence, open the unit." "Sir, I don't have the tenant's authorization to—" "Terrence, open the unit. Now." There was a long, terrible pause. And then Terrence, a 48-year-old black man from the 5th Ward, a man who had known Xavier since Xavier was still driving a used Camry and calling himself an entrepreneur, did something Xavier had never seen him do before. He stepped between his boss and the door. "Xavier, please, just walk away from this one." "Excuse me?" "I'm asking you, as a man, not as your manager. Just this one door. Walk away." Xavier's jaw tightened. Something in his chest, something he could not name, was starting to hum. He reached past Terrence, took the master key from the ring on his belt, and slid it into the padlock himself. The lock clicked. He lifted the door. The first thing Xavier Drummond noticed was the smell. It was not the smell of storage. Storage units smelled like cardboard and mildew and the slow, patient rot of things that people had decided not to want anymore. Storage units smelled like forgetting. Unit 14B smelled like pine sol. It smelled like a floor that had been mopped that morning. It smelled like a child's shampoo, the cheap green kind from the dollar store. It smelled, faintly, of milk. The second thing he noticed was the light. There was a small battery lantern in the corner, still faintly glowing, resting on a folded piece of cardboard that had been cut into the shape of a small table. The third thing he noticed was the wall. The back wall of the unit was not the wall of the unit. It was a false wall. Flattened cardboard boxes, taped together with the kind of care that meant someone had spent hours on it. Amazon logos, Chewy logos, HEB logos, all of them turned inward so the seams matched. The fourth thing he noticed was the map, taped to the cardboard wall, at exactly the eye level of a small child, was a hand-drawn map of the walk from this facility to Blackshear Elementary School. Every crosswalk was drawn in red marker. Every safe stop, a gas station, a laundromat, a fire station, was drawn in green. The name at the top of the map, in a woman's careful handwriting, said, "Dante and Amara's Safe Path, version 4. Version 4. She had drawn it 4 times. Xavier Drummond, the billionaire, took one step into that unit, and then he saw the fifth thing. On a small overturned milk crate in the corner, folded neatly, sat a library book. Frog and Toad Are Friends. A bookmark stuck out of it. A bookmark cut from a cereal box with the words "Dante's Place" written in a child's shaky pencil. And next to the book, on the same milk crate, was a small metal tin box. Rectangular. Painted red once, now faded to pink. The kind of tin that once held Christmas cookies from Walmart. Xavier stopped breathing, because he knew that tin. He knew that exact tin. He had grown up with that exact tin sitting on the dashboard of a 1994 Buick Century, in the parking lot of a Motel 6 in East Point, Georgia, in the winter of 1993, when he was 9 years old and his mother, Yvonne Drummond, was working 2 jobs and sleeping in the driver's seat so that Xavier could stretch out across the back with a coat over his legs. His mother had kept everything important in a tin exactly like that one. Birth certificates, social security cards, a folded piece of paper with the phone number of a woman at the church who had promised to help if things got worse. The tin box had a name in his memory. His mother had called it our getting out box. Xavier Drummond, 41 years old, worth $1.4 billion, stood in the doorway of Unit 14B and felt his knees do something they had not done in 32 years. They started to shake. Behind him, Terence spoke quietly. "Sir, please, let me close this door." Xavier did not turn around. "Who is she?" "Sir?" "Terence, who is she?" Terence took a long breath. "Her name is Shirley Mae Johnson. She's 34. She has 2 kids, Dante, 10, and Amara, 6. She's been paying $147 a month every single month for 7 months, in cash, in exact change, delivered to my office on the 1st of every month at 6:15 in the morning before she walks the kids to school." Xavier's eyes moved across the unit. The 3 folded mats behind the cardboard wall, the small cooler, the neat stack of school papers. "How long have you known?" "Since the 2nd month." "And you didn't report it?" "No, sir." "Why?" Terence's voice cracked just slightly. "Because my mama did the same thing in 1987, Mr. Drummond. Except she did it in the back of a Greyhound station in Beaumont, and nobody let her stay. And I have thought about that woman every single day of my life since." Xavier finally turned around. The 2 men, the billionaire and the property manager, looked at each other across 9 years of employment history and 1 storage unit that had suddenly become the most important room either of them had ever stood in. "Where is she right now?" "She just walked her kids to school. She'll be back at 7:20. She always is." Xavier looked at his watch. 6:58 a.m. He nodded once. "Close the door, Terence, but do not lock it. And do not tell her I'm here." "Sir, what are you going to do?" Xavier Drummond, for the first time in maybe 15 years, did not have an answer to a business question. He said only, "I'm going to wait." Shirley kissed Amara on the forehead at 6:58 a.m. at the gate of Blackshear Elementary. She waited until the little girl had disappeared through the yellow doors. Then she turned to Dante. Dante did not want a kiss. 10-year-old boys, even 10-year-old boys who live in storage units, do not want kisses at the school gate. She squeezed his shoulder instead. "Mrs. Alvarez is picking you up for after-school reading again today?" "Yes, ma'am." "You gonna work hard for her?" "Yes, ma'am." "You know I love you?" He looked up at her. 10 years old, eyes older than her own. "I know, Mama." She watched him walk in. And then Shirley Mae Johnson turned around and began the 0.4-mile walk back to the storage unit she called home. She walked past the laundromat, past the tire shop, past the corner where the man named Reggie sold single cigarettes for $1. She waved at him. He waved back. Reggie did not know she was homeless. Reggie thought she was a home health aide working nights at the nursing home on Blodgett, which was the story she had told everyone in the neighborhood, and which had been true once, 3 months ago, before her hours got cut. Now she cleaned houses in River Oaks 2 days a week. Cash, $85 a house. She had exactly $312 in the tin box. She turned into the gravel lot of Facility 217. She saw the black Escalade. Her feet stopped. Her stomach did the thing it had done every day for 7 months. The specific cold plunge of a woman who has been running from a man for a long, long time. But the Escalade did not belong to the man she was running from. She had memorized his car. His car was a silver F-150 with a dent in the tailgate. This was somebody else. Somebody with money. Which, in Shirley's experience, was almost always worse. She kept walking, because a woman like Shirley did not have the luxury of turning around. A woman like Shirley had 2 children and $312 and 1 metal tin box and 1 unit door, and no other plan on this planet. She turned onto row 2. She saw the door of Unit 14B, closed but not padlocked. And she saw the tall black man in the charcoal overcoat, standing 3 feet from her door, hands in his pockets, waiting. She stopped 6 feet away. He looked at her. She looked at him. And Shirley Mae Johnson, who had survived 17 years of a man's fists, 6 months of a shelter system that tried to separate her from her son, and 7 months of a concrete floor. Shirley Mae Johnson lifted her chin. "Whatever you gon' do to me," she said quietly, "do it fast. My babies come home at 3:15. Xavier Drummond had prepared, in the 62 minutes since he had opened that door, exactly 7 different opening lines. Every single one of them died in his throat. What came out instead was, "Ma'am, my name is Xavier. I own this facility." She did not flinch. "I know who you are, Mr. Drummond. Your picture is on the sign at the front gate. Your picture is on the receipt Terrence gives me every month. You know my name. I know every man's name whose building my children are sleeping in." The sentence hit him like a fist. He took 1 step back, not away from her, but away from the man he had been 6 minutes ago. "Ma'am, Shirley, may I—" "Miss Johnson. Miss Johnson, may I ask you a question? You gonna call the police?" "No, ma'am." "You gonna throw us out?" "No, ma'am." "Then ask your question." Xavier looked at the closed door of Unit 14B. "Why this facility?" She blinked. "What?" "There are 16 self-storage facilities within 5 miles of this one. Some of them are cheaper. Some of them have better security. Some of them have 24-hour access. Why this one?" Shirley Mae Johnson stared at the billionaire in the charcoal overcoat for a very long moment. And then she said the sentence that Xavier Drummond would repeat to his therapist, his board of directors, and his own reflection in the mirror for the rest of his life. "I did not choose a storage unit, Mr. Drummond. I chose the distance between my son and the only classroom in this city that is teaching him to read." Xavier's throat closed. He said quietly, 0.4 miles. Shirley's eyes widened, just barely. She had never told anyone that number. Not Terrence, not the woman at the church, not the caseworker who tried to put her in a shelter 41 miles from Blackshear Elementary. "How did you—" "I saw the map, on the wall inside. Version 4. She looked down at the gravel. "Dante was in the 2nd grade last year. He was reading at a kindergarten level. His teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, she pulled me aside one day, right before everything fell apart with his father, and she said, 'Miss Johnson, your son is not slow. Your son is scared. And if we can get him consistent, if we can just keep him in this building with me for 1 more year, I can teach him to read.'" Shirley's voice did not break. Shirley's voice had not broken in 7 years. Shirley's voice had been forged in a fire hotter than any billionaire's boardroom. "So when I had to leave the apartment, when he found us the 3rd time, I sat on a bench outside the Kroger with my phone, and I measured every shelter, every extended stay motel, every friend's couch, every possible address in a 50-mile radius. And the closest safe place, the only place where nobody would ask my name, where I could pay in cash, where nobody would put us in a database he could search, was this storage unit? 0.4 miles from Mrs. Alvarez. She lifted her eyes. So no, Mr. Drummond, I did not choose to be homeless. I chose my son. Xavier Drummond did not remember walking to the small metal bench outside the office trailer. He just remembered sitting on it. Shirley stood in front of him, arms crossed, waiting for him to say whatever he was going to say. To call the cops, to hand her an eviction notice, to offer her a check with terms attached. She had been offered checks with terms attached before. Every time, the terms cost more than the check. But Xavier Drummond was not thinking about a check. Xavier Drummond was thinking about a Buick Century. Winter of 1993, East Point, Georgia. His mother, Yvonne, wearing 2 coats because the heater in the Buick had died in November and it was 31 degrees outside. Him in the back seat, 9 years old, doing his multiplication tables by the light of a gas station across the road because his mother had said, "Baby, if you learn your times tables tonight, you don't have to learn them tomorrow. And tomorrow we might not have a light." He remembered her tin box. He remembered his mother pulling it out from under the driver's seat every single night to make sure his birth certificate was still in it. In case they had to run again. In case the man his mother was hiding from, a man named Curtis, who Xavier had spent 32 years pretending was never his father, found them again. He remembered her saying one night in that Buick when she thought he was asleep, "Baby, I'm not raising you in a car. I'm raising you close to your school. There is a difference, and one day you gonna understand the difference." Xavier Drummond, on that metal bench outside Facility 217, understood the difference for the very first time in his adult life. He looked up at Shirley Mae Johnson. And Xavier Drummond, the billionaire, the CEO, the Morehouse commencement speaker, the face on the cover of Black Enterprise, put his face in his hands and cried the way a 9-year-old boy cries in the back seat of a 1994 Buick Century. 3 units down, in Unit 14F, an elderly woman named Mrs. Odessa Grant was watching the entire scene through the 2-inch gap she always left in her own roll-up door. Mrs. Odessa Grant was 73 years old. She had been a middle school science teacher in Houston Independent School District for 39 years. She had raised 3 children. She had buried a husband. And in the spring of last year, stage 3 ovarian cancer and $214,000 in medical bills had taken her small brick house on Blodgett Street and left her with a Toyota Camry, a Social Security check, and Unit 14F. Mrs. Odessa Grant had been the one who first noticed Shirley. Mrs. Odessa Grant had been the one who left a plate of foil-wrapped cornbread outside Unit 14B without a note one Sunday evening in April. Mrs. Odessa Grant had been the one who, when Amara got a fever in June, appeared at Shirley's door with children's Tylenol, a thermometer, and the quiet words, "Baby, I got you. Just tonight. Just this one night." And now, Mrs. Odessa Grant was watching a billionaire cry into his hands outside her storage unit home. She lifted her door the rest of the way and walked out. She was wearing a floral housecoat, orthopedic slippers, and the specific expression of a black woman in her 70s who had run out of patience for men who cried without doing anything about it. She walked straight up to Xavier Drummond, put one arthritic finger under his chin, lifted his face like he was one of her 7th graders, and said, "Son, stop weeping. Weeping don't feed a child. Weeping don't pay a rent. You a rich man. You cry on your own time. Right now, you get up off that bench and you do something." Xavier stared at her. She stared back. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. That's right. Yes, ma'am. Now stand up. He stood up. Xavier Drummond pulled out his phone. The first call he made was to a woman named Danielle Freeman, the managing partner of the largest legal aid nonprofit in Houston, and the woman whose scholarship at Texas Southern University he had funded for the last 6 years. Danielle, Xavier. Xavier, it's 7:34 in the morning. What's wrong? I need a protective order filed today. Not this week. Today. Client's name is Shirley Mae Johnson. 2 children. Domestic violence survivor. She's been off-grid for 7 months, and I need her legally protected before she goes back on any database. I want your best attorney on this. I want it moved to the top of the docket. And I am personally covering every fee, every filing, every cost. Permanently. Xavier, where is she? She's standing in front of me. Silence. I'll have an attorney at your location in 40 minutes. Click. The second call was to a man named Marcus Whitfield, principal of Blackshear Elementary School. Marcus, Xavier Drummond. Mr. Drummond, is everything... Your after-school reading program. Mrs. Alvarez's program. The one that is currently funded on a $12,000 annual grant from the district. I want the entire program endowed. Permanently. Salary for Mrs. Alvarez at market rate. Full curriculum. Free books for every child. Every year. Forever. Have your development office send the paperwork to Danielle Freeman's office by end of business today. Mr. Drummond, that's approximately $2.4 million over 10 years. Marcus, I have $1.4 billion. I know what it costs. Click. The third call was to the Chicago REIT that had been about to buy Facility 217. This is Xavier Drummond. Mr. Drummond, we were just finalizing the deal is off. Facility 217 is not for sale. Not now, not ever. My general counsel will send your team a formal withdrawal by noon. Click. The fourth call was to Terrence Baker. Except Terrence Baker was standing 3 feet away and had heard every word. Xavier turned to him. Terrence, effective immediately, you are the regional director of a new division I am creating inside Drummond Storage Holdings. It is called Drummond Homes. Your job is to identify tenants across all 313 of my facilities who are living in units and transition them, with dignity, with legal support, with financial assistance, into permanent housing within their children's school districts. Your starting salary is $180,000 a year. You have unlimited hiring authority. You start Monday. Terrence Baker, 48 years old, from the 5th Ward, opened his mouth to say something and could not say anything, and simply nodded. One time. Shirley Mae Johnson had been standing quietly through all 4 phone calls. Now she spoke. Mr. Drummond. Miss Johnson. I don't take charity. Xavier looked at her. I know you don't. Everything I have earned in my life, I have earned. Every dollar, every meal, every mile of that walk to my son's school. I did not come here to be rescued. I did not come here to be your redemption story. If you are doing this because it makes you feel good about yourself, then I need you to stop. And I need you to walk away. And I need you to let me keep doing what I was doing, because what I was doing was working. Xavier was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Miss Johnson, in 1993, my mother, Yvonne Drummond, slept in a 1994 Buick Century in the parking lot of a Motel 6 in East Point, Georgia, for 4 months. She did that because the school I was attending was 1.1 miles from that Motel 6, and she had decided that I was not going to lose one more year to a man she was running from. She kept a tin box under the driver's seat with my birth certificate in it. She called it our getting out box. Shirley's eyes did not leave his. When I saw your tin box on that milk crate, Miss Johnson, I did not see charity. I saw my mother. And I am not offering you charity. I am offering you the exact same thing my mother needed and did not get. I am offering you time. I am offering you legal protection. I am offering you the school district you have already chosen. And I am telling you that I am not doing this for you. I am doing this because 32 years ago, some man with a checkbook drove past a Buick Century in a Motel 6 parking lot, and he did not stop. And I have spent my entire adult life becoming that man. And today, Miss Johnson, I am asking you, please, let me not be that man. Shirley Mae Johnson looked at the billionaire in the charcoal overcoat. And for the first time in 7 months, she let one tear fall. Just one. She wiped it fast. And she said, "My babies get home at 3:15. Xavier nodded. "Then we better get to work." At 8:14 a.m., a silver Lexus pulled into the gravel lot of Facility 217, and a tall black woman in a navy pantsuit stepped out with a briefcase and a laptop bag. Her name was Adeze Okonkwo. She was 31 years old, second-generation Nigerian-American, Harvard Law School class of 2020, and she was the sharpest domestic violence attorney at Danielle Freeman's nonprofit. She walked straight up to Shirley. "Miss Johnson, my name is Adeze. I'm your attorney. You do not owe me a fee. You do not owe me a thank you. You owe me the truth about one man, and then you owe me an hour of your time. And by 5 o'clock this evening, that man will not legally be able to come within 500 feet of you or your children in the state of Texas. Do you understand me?" Shirley stared at her. "You gonna make him stop?" "Miss Johnson, I'm going to make the state of Texas make him stop. There is a difference. And by the end of today, you are going to know that difference." Shirley Mae Johnson, who had spent 17 years being told that no piece of paper had ever stopped a man's fist, nodded slowly. Okay. Let's go inside the office trailer. I brought coffee. It's terrible. Drink it anyway." For the first time in 7 months, Shirley Mae Johnson laughed. It was a small laugh, a dry one, a laugh that had been buried under 7 months of concrete floor. But it was a laugh. The rest of the morning moved faster than any morning Shirley had ever lived. By 9:30, Adeze had filed the emergency protective order. By 10:15, a caseworker from Danielle Freeman's office had toured 3 furnished 2-bedroom apartments in the Blackshear Elementary attendance zone. One of them, at $1,340 a month, was 3 blocks from the school. By 11, Xavier had personally called the property manager of that apartment complex, wired the first 6 months of rent, and covered the security deposit. By 12:30, a caseworker had driven Shirley to a Target on Old Spanish Trail with a $2,000 gift card and instructions to buy every single thing her family needed to sleep in a real apartment that night. Sheets, pillows, plates, a cheap dining table, 2 twin mattresses for the kids, 1 queen for herself. Shirley bought exactly $743 of what she needed. She returned the gift card with $1,257 still on it and said quietly, "I only take what I need." The caseworker, a woman named Patricia, looked at her, put the gift card in her purse, and said, "Miss Johnson, you are going to be the reason this whole program works." By 2 p.m., the mattresses were delivered. By 2:45 p.m., Shirley stood in the empty living room of a small two-bedroom apartment on Prairie Street, 3 blocks from Blackshear Elementary, and she did not cry. Shirley Mae Johnson did not cry in empty apartments. Shirley Mae Johnson only cried in the specific silences that came after her children were asleep. At 3 p.m., Xavier Drummond drove her, personally, in his own Escalade, Terrence had insisted, the 4 blocks from the apartment to the elementary school. At 3:14 p.m., they parked at the curb. At 3:15 p.m., the yellow doors of Blackshear Elementary opened, and Dante and Amara Johnson walked out into the Houston afternoon sun. Amara saw her mother first and screamed, "Mama!" and ran. Dante saw the black Escalade, saw the tall man in the charcoal overcoat, and stopped. 10 years old, reading 2 grade levels behind. Silent. He looked at his mother. He looked at Xavier. And Dante Johnson, who had learned in 7 months not to trust any man in a nice car, said the first thing that came into his head. "Mama, are we in trouble?" Shirley knelt down on the sidewalk. She put both hands on her son's shoulders. "Baby, we are not in trouble." "Then why is he here?" Shirley looked up at Xavier. Xavier crouched down, slowly, carefully, the way a man crouches down when he understands for the first time that a 10-year-old boy is a whole, entire human being with a right to his own answer. "Dante, my name is Xavier. Your mama has been working very hard for a very long time to keep you and your sister safe and close to Mrs. Alvarez. And today, I am here because I want to help her keep doing that. That is all. You are not in trouble. Your mama is not in trouble. And if you ever need anything, you tell your mama, and she will tell me, and it will happen. Do you understand me, sir?" Dante Johnson looked up at the billionaire. "You called me sir." "I called you sir, because you are the man of your family, and you have been the man of your family for a long time, and I see you." Dante Johnson's lower lip did something that 10-year-old boys' lower lips do exactly 1 time in their lives. And then Dante Johnson wrapped his arms around Xavier Drummond's neck and cried into his charcoal overcoat. Amara, 6 years old, watching all of this, decided the moment required her participation, and she hugged Xavier's leg. Xavier Drummond, on a public sidewalk in 3rd Ward, Houston, at 3:16 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, held 2 children he had not known existed 6 hours ago, and understood for the first time what his mother had meant when she said the word legacy. At 4:02 p.m., Shirley Mae Johnson unlocked the door of the apartment on Prairie Street. Dante walked in first. He walked slowly. He walked the way a 10-year-old walks into a place he does not believe is real. He walked into the small living room. He walked into the small kitchen. He walked into the small bedroom where 2 twin mattresses sat on the floor, one with a blue sheet and one with a pink sheet because Amara had specifically requested pink at Target and Shirley had specifically agreed. Dante stood in the middle of that bedroom. He looked at his mother. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." "Is this ours?" "Yes, baby." "For how long?" Shirley opened her mouth. Xavier, standing quietly in the doorway, spoke first. "For as long as your mama wants it to be, Dante. Not 1 day less." Dante looked at Xavier. Then Dante walked over to his blue mattress. He knelt down. He put his hand on the mattress. He pressed down on it. It was soft. It was the first soft thing Dante Johnson had slept on in 211 days. Dante Johnson, 10 years old, laid down on that mattress, in his school uniform, in his sneakers, in the middle of the afternoon, and he did not say a word. He just closed his eyes, and he slept. And Shirley Mae Johnson, who had not cried in front of another adult in 7 years, sat down on the floor next to her son, and she wept. Xavier Drummond closed the bedroom door quietly. He walked into the small living room. He sat on the floor in his $3,000 suit against the wall. And he waited. Because Xavier Drummond had understood something else that afternoon that he had never understood before. Sometimes the most important thing a rich man can do is sit on a floor and wait. 6 weeks later, on a cold, bright Saturday morning in December, Xavier Drummond stood in the gymnasium of Blackshear Elementary School. The gymnasium was full. Every child in the after-school reading program was there. Every parent. Every teacher. Mrs. Alvarez was in the front row, wearing her Sunday dress, holding a tissue in one hand and a small, gold-embossed folder in the other. The folder contained the deed of endowment for the Yvonne Drummond reading program. Permanently funded, permanently protected, in the name of a woman who had once slept in a 1994 Buick Century in East Point, Georgia, so that her son could learn to read. At the podium, Xavier looked out at the crowd. He saw Shirley Mae Johnson in the third row. She was wearing a simple black dress. Her hair was pulled back. Dante sat on her left in a small navy suit that Xavier had insisted on paying for. Amara sat on her right in a pink dress, kicking her feet because her feet did not yet reach the floor. Xavier cleared his throat. My mother was named Yvonne Drummond. She died in 2011. She never saw a storage unit named after her. She never saw a reading program named after her. She never even saw the inside of the building I bought her at the end of her life, because by the time I bought it, she was too tired to walk up the stairs. My mother spent the last 4 decades of her life cleaning other people's homes so that I could have my own. And for a long time, for a shameful long time, I thought the way to honor her was to become the kind of man who owned buildings. I was wrong. The way to honor her is to become the kind of man who unlocks them. He paused. 6 weeks ago, I unlocked a door in row 2 of Facility 217. And on the other side of that door, I found a woman named Shirley Mae Johnson. Miss Johnson had made a decision 7 months earlier that I want every person in this room to understand. She did not choose to live in a storage unit. She chose the distance between her son and this classroom. 0.4 miles. She measured it. She drew it on a map 4 different times in red and green marker, and she taped it to the wall of a storage unit so that her son would know his way to a reading teacher named Mrs. Alvarez. He looked at Mrs. Alvarez. Mrs. Alvarez was already crying. Mrs. Alvarez, what you do in this school is not a job. It is a rescue mission. And from this day forward, the rescue mission has a permanent budget. The gymnasium erupted. Xavier waited. Then he looked at Shirley. Miss Johnson, would you please come up here? Shirley Mae Johnson had not agreed in advance to speak. She had told Xavier 3 days ago, I am not a public person, Mr. Drummond. He had said, I am not asking you to be a public person, Miss Johnson. I am asking you to be yourself, in public, for 4 minutes. She had said, I'll think about it. Now she stood up. She walked to the podium. She adjusted the microphone. She looked at the crowd. And Shirley Mae Johnson, a woman who had cleaned houses in River Oaks 2 days a week and slept on a concrete floor for 7 months, spoke. My name is Shirley. I am the mother of Dante and Amara. 6 months ago, I lived in a storage unit that Mr. Drummond owns. He did not know I lived there. His property manager, Terrence, knew, and Terrence protected us, and I want everyone in this room to know that Terrence Baker is the reason my babies are alive, and I will never forget him for that. The crowd applauded. Terrence, sitting in the 5th row in a suit he had bought that morning, put his face in his hands. I want to say something to the mothers in this room, because I know some of you. I have seen some of you. I have walked past some of you on Prairie Street, and I have known, the way one mother always knows another, that you are one paycheck, one man, one bad month away from where I was. And I want you to hear me when I say this. She paused. Her voice did not shake. A mother does not choose where she lives. A mother chooses where her children can still become something. That is the only geography that matters. And if the world does not give you a house that is close to your children's classroom, then you build a house. You build it out of cardboard walls and battery lanterns and hand-drawn maps and one metal tin box full of every piece of paper your children will ever need. You build it, and you do not apologize for it, and you do not ask permission for it, and you do not stop until somebody with a key opens a door and says, "Baby, come inside. It is time to rest." The gymnasium was completely silent. Mr. Drummond opened a door for me. But I want everyone in this room to understand something. I did not need to be saved. I needed to be seen. And there is a difference. And I am asking every person in this room who has money, and every person in this room who has a building, and every person in this room who has a key, I am asking you to look. To just look. There are Shirleys in every one of your buildings. There are Dantes in every one of your classrooms. And they are not asking for your rescue. They are asking for your attention. She stepped back from the microphone. Then she stepped forward again. Thank you. That is all. The gymnasium stood up. Every person. At the same time. And they clapped for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Xavier counted later on the security footage. And Shirley Mae Johnson stood at that podium and did not cry. Because Shirley Mae Johnson had already cried the only tear she was ever going to allow the world to see. And it had fallen on a gravel lot 6 weeks earlier. And she was done. 1 year later. October again. The Houston sun cracked the horizon over a small 2-bedroom apartment on Prairie Street. Inside the apartment, an alarm buzzed. A real alarm, on a real nightstand, next to a real bed. Shirley Mae Johnson opened her eyes. She looked at the ceiling. It was a real ceiling, painted eggshell white. She had painted it herself 3 months ago, on a Saturday, with Dante on the ladder handing her the roller. She got up. She walked into the kitchen. She made breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, toast, turkey bacon. Orange juice from a carton, not from a small plastic bottle bought at a gas station. At 6:30 a.m., Dante walked out of his bedroom. 11 years old now. Reading at grade level. He sat at the small dining table. He picked up his glass of orange juice. He drank half of it. He set it down. He said quietly, Mama? Yes, baby. Mrs. Alvarez said I might get moved up a grade level next semester in reading. Shirley froze at the stove. She turned around. Slowly. She looked at her son. Baby, that is the best thing anyone has ever said to me in my whole life. Dante Johnson smiled. A small, careful smile. A smile that had been growing back into his face slowly over the last 12 months. Like a plant that had been kept in a dark room for too long. I know, Mama. He picked up his fork. He ate his eggs. Amara, 7 now, walked out of her bedroom holding a stuffed unicorn Xavier had given her for her birthday, and she climbed into her chair and announced at full volume, I have decided I am going to be a doctor. Shirley laughed. Okay, Dr. Johnson, eat your eggs. At 7:15 a.m., Shirley walked her 2 children the 3 blocks to Blackshear Elementary School. She kissed Amara at the gate. She squeezed Dante's shoulder. She watched them walk in. And then Shirley Mae Johnson turned around and walked home. Not to a storage unit, not to a shelter, not to a friend's couch, but to a small apartment on Prairie Street where a coffee cup was still warm on the kitchen counter and where her name was on the lease. Downtown, on the 47th floor of a glass condominium, Xavier Drummond sat at his desk. The desk was different now. It used to be black lacquer. It was now, instead, a large, scarred oak desk that Xavier had bought at an estate sale in East Point, Georgia, 6 months ago, because it had reminded him of the desk his mother had once told him she wanted someday when she had a house of her own. She had never gotten the house. But now Xavier had the desk. On the desk sat 3 items. Item 1 was a photograph of Yvonne Drummond, aged 42, standing next to a 1994 Buick Century in the parking lot of a Motel 6 in East Point, Georgia. Xavier had never displayed this photograph before in his life. It had lived for 32 years in a shoebox in a closet in his second home in Aspen. Now it lived on his desk. Item 2 was a small metal tin box, faded pink, sitting next to the photograph. It was his mother's tin. He had unpacked it, finally, 6 months ago. It contained his birth certificate, his social security card, a folded piece of paper with a church lady's phone number in Atlanta, and a photograph, cracked and faded, of Xavier at age 7, holding a library book, in front of an elementary school in East Point. Item 3 was a small framed piece of construction paper. On the construction paper, in a 10-year-old's careful handwriting, was written, To Mr. Xavier, thank you for the door. Dante, age 11. Xavier looked at those 3 items every morning before he answered a single email. Today, at 7:32 a.m., before he answered a single email, he stood up. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. He looked out over the Houston skyline. And Xavier Drummond, 42 years old, worth $1.4 billion, whispered, quietly, to no one, to his mother, to the boy he had once been in the back seat of a 1994 Buick Century. I see them, Mama. I see them now. 6 months after that gymnasium speech, Drummond Homes, the division Xavier had created in a gravel parking lot, had a staff of 47. Terrence Baker ran it. Terrence Baker had, in those 6 months, identified 211 tenants across the Drummond storage empire who were living in units. 211. He had transitioned every single one of them into permanent housing within their children's school districts. Every single one. Xavier had personally funded the security deposits, the first 3 months of rent, the legal support, the caseworker teams, and, this was the part that made the Wall Street Journal write a very long article about him, the ongoing case management for a minimum of 24 months per family. The article's headline was, "The Billionaire Who Locked the Doors and Then Unlocked Them." Xavier read the article. He did not tweet it. He did not frame it. He printed one copy. He mailed it to Shirley Mae Johnson at the apartment on Prairie Street. He wrote, in pen, at the top, "You did this, not me. X." Shirley put it in a drawer. She did not frame it either. But every once in a while, on a hard day, because there were still hard days, and there would always be hard days, because a woman does not walk out of 17 years of running and stop looking over her shoulder overnight, Shirley opened that drawer. She read the note. She closed the drawer. She went back to work. That December, the 2nd December, Shirley invited Xavier to Christmas dinner at the apartment on Prairie Street. Xavier had never been invited to a Christmas dinner in a small apartment before. Xavier had spent every Christmas of the last 11 years at a resort in Aspen, alone, with a bottle of Louis XIII cognac and a spreadsheet. He accepted the invitation immediately. He arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, in slacks and a soft gray sweater. No charcoal overcoat, no matte black suit. Holding a wrapped box for Dante, a wrapped box for Amara, and a bottle of sparkling apple cider for Shirley, because Shirley did not drink. Mrs. Odessa Grant was there. Mrs. Odessa Grant now lived in a small, subsidized senior apartment 2 miles away, in a program Xavier had personally endowed at Xavier's expense. Because Mrs. Odessa Grant had refused to accept anything from him personally, and had said, "Baby, if you're gonna help me by helping every other black grandma in this city who is 1 bad month from a storage unit." He had helped every other black grandma in the city. Mrs. Odessa Grant now sat on Shirley's small couch in a red Christmas sweater, holding Amara on her lap, teaching Amara the words to a hymn her own grandmother had taught her in 1957. Terrence Baker was there. Terrence Baker had brought his wife, Deborah, and their 2 teenage daughters. And Deborah had brought a sweet potato pie the size of a car tire, and the entire apartment smelled like brown sugar and cinnamon. Adeze Okonkwo, the attorney, was there. She had brought her mother, a small Nigerian woman named Ngozi, who spoke very little English, but who had, upon meeting Shirley, taken Shirley's face in both her hands and said in Igbo one long sentence that Adeze had translated softly. "My mother says you are a lion. She says a lion does not need permission to be a lion. She says, 'Welcome, sister.'" Shirley had cried, once, quickly, and then wiped her face and served the ham. They ate. They laughed. Dante, 11 years old, read out loud from a chapter book, Bud, Not Buddy, for exactly 12 minutes, without stumbling once. And Xavier Drummond, the billionaire, cried into his sweet potato pie. Amara sang a song she had made up. Mrs. Odessa Grant told a story about her husband, who had been a Pullman porter on the Southern Pacific Railroad in the 1960s. Terrence's daughters showed everyone a TikTok dance, and Xavier tried the TikTok dance. And Xavier was very, very bad at the TikTok dance, and Amara laughed until she got the hiccups. At 9 p.m., Shirley stood up. She raised a small glass of sparkling apple cider. She looked around the room. She looked at every person. She said, quietly, "To everyone who opened a door." They all raised their glasses. And Shirley Mae Johnson, who had once slept on a concrete floor, drank a toast to freedom in an apartment that was hers. 2 years to the day after Xavier Drummond first walked down row 2 of Facility 217, he stood in front of Unit 14B one more time. The unit was empty now. It had been empty for a long time. Xavier had made a decision, 6 months after that first morning, that Unit 14B would never be rented again. He had kept it locked. He had paid the imaginary rent to his own company every month. He had kept it, the way a man keeps a room in a house, a room that reminds him of something he must never forget. Now, on this specific October morning at 6:47 a.m., the exact time 2 years earlier that he had first lifted this door, Xavier Drummond turned the key one more time and lifted the door of Unit 14B. The unit was clean. He had had it professionally cleaned every month for 2 years. He walked inside. He set down a small object he had brought with him. It was a bronze plaque, small, about the size of a hardcover book. He set it against the back wall, the wall where a cardboard map had once hung, taped in place with the careful hands of a mother who was measuring the distance between her son and a reading teacher. The plaque read, Unit 14B. In this space, from March to October, a mother named Shirley Mae Johnson raised her 2 children, Dante and Amara, while she waited for the world to see her. It saw her, and it changed. May every locked door remember what was once inside it. Yvonne Drummond Foundation, in memory of every mother who chose her children over her own comfort. Xavier looked at the plaque. He stood in the middle of the empty unit for a long moment. He thought about a Buick Century. He thought about a mother in 2 coats. He thought about a 10-year-old boy who had asked, "Are we in trouble?" on a public sidewalk, and about the answer Xavier had given him. He walked out. He turned around. He looked at Unit 14B one more time. And Xavier Drummond, the man who had once believed that every unit not generating revenue was costing him money, lifted his hand to the small silver padlock, and he closed it. Not to lock the past inside, but to keep the memory safe. Shirley Mae Johnson works today at Drummond Homes. She is a lead caseworker. Her salary is $72,000 a year plus benefits, plus tuition assistance, plus a retirement plan that vests in 5 years. She specializes in identifying mothers who are living in storage units, motels, cars, and shelters. And she personally walks them, the way she was once walked, into apartments within their children's school districts. She has, to date, walked 147 mothers home. Dante Johnson is 13 years old. He reads at a 7th grade level. He has, on his own initiative, applied to a summer creative writing program at Rice University, and last spring, he wrote a short story titled The Boy in Unit 14B. The story won a district-wide competition. The story ended with this sentence, which Dante read aloud in the same gymnasium where his mother had once spoken. My mother did not save me. My mother waited with me. And that was the same thing. Because waiting is what love looks like when it does not have a house yet. Amara Johnson is 8 years old. She still says she is going to be a doctor. Xavier Drummond is 43 years old. He no longer lives on the 47th floor. He sold that condominium 2 years ago and moved into a small 3-bedroom house in 3rd Ward, 4 blocks from the gravel lot of Facility 217. Because he had decided that a man who owns 313 buildings should probably live in a neighborhood. He has never been on the cover of Black Enterprise again. He has not asked to be. The Yvonne Drummond Reading Program now operates in 14 elementary schools across Houston. Drummond Homes now operates in 17 states. Terrence Baker's staff has, to date, walked 2,418 families out of storage units and into apartments. And somewhere, at this exact moment, as you are watching this video, there is a woman standing in a gravel lot, holding a padlock in one hand and a child's hand in the other. And she is measuring the distance from her feet to her son's classroom. She is measuring it because she has decided that the geometry of her love is going to be stronger than the geometry of her poverty. She is a Shirley, and she does not know it yet, but somebody is going to open her door, because Xavier Drummond opened one. And now, so must the rest of us. If this story moved you, do 3 things. 1. Like this video, because the algorithm decides which stories get seen, and every Shirley in America needs to be seen. 2. Comment one word. Seen. Just that one word. So every mother watching this, in every storage unit in America, knows that somebody is looking. 3. Subscribe, because there are more stories like Shirley's, and every single one of them deserves a door. We do not know their names yet, but we will, together.